with staff about this. So California, if you're not familiar with it, population of 40 million people, roughly. It's the largest state in the country. I think for comparison's sake, I think Mississippi is probably under 4 million, maybe 3.5 million or something like that. So more than 10 times the size of Mississippi. Economy is the 5th largest in the world. The only places with an economy larger than California, I think, is Japan, Germany, China, and the United States. Those are the only places that have a GDP or an economy that's larger. The state's transportation network is massive. It's vast. I think Texas may have a larger network than California does, but California's is right up there. 50,000 miles of highways, 300 plus transit agencies, more than 20,000 bridges, 400 public use airports. The list goes on and on how extensive. But not only this, I think is important to note about California, but I think it's important to note as well how diverse the state is. The Latino, the African American, the white population, Asian population, it's probably the most diverse in the country. I think the Latino population in the state now is up to 51%. So more than any other state in the country. And also the department that I'm fortunate to be the leader of amongst many other leaders is by far the largest as well. We have a staff of 22,000. You heard Dr. Herbert say that, 22,000 people on the team, and a budget that's approaching 16 billion. And a lot of high expectations that come with that vast budget and that vast staff as well to meet the many goals that the state of California has. Next slide. It's taken a while to transition there. Oh yeah, the other way. There we go. All right, thank you. So within the last year, we've sort of settled in as a department into guiding principles that help us make decisions throughout the department. These guiding principles are foundational principles, as this graphic says, are these 3 items right here that you see: issues around equity, climate action, and safety. You may look at this and say, well, yeah, these are issues that I hear about very often every day. So it's no surprise that a transportation department or a governmental entity is saying these are their foundational principles. But I can assure you that you go to any of the other 49 state DOTs, you won't see a makeup of foundational principles or guiding principles like this. You may see safety because it's very technical in its nature, but these other issues like climate action and equity sort of being at the core of what the department does every day, you're not going to see this often. So let me briefly, and I'll have a chance to explain this a little bit more, but I think everybody knows in equity what we're talking about, giving people, regardless of where they're from, regardless of their ability, their gender, their race, giving them an opportunity to succeed within the state and within this department is what equity is about. Climate action, the fact that from an environmental standpoint, the state of California has so many challenges with all the upside that the state has. There's a lot of activity. There are a lot of things that are impacting us that I'll explain a little bit more that we need to address. And then safety as well. I'll explain safety a little later. Next slide. So we also have 5 priorities. We were fortunate as a team. We came together in 2019 before the pandemic hit. We were able to identify and coalesce around 5 priorities. And those 5 priorities kind of morphed into what you saw before, those foundational principles. But our 5 priorities are safety, modality, innovation, efficiencies, and partnership. And what I'm trying to share with everybody today is a little bit of how I help lead and run this department, and some of the, the personal, the personal growth that I've had as well, the personal experiences that I've had, but and mix those two things together so you can understand a little bit of how things are happening in workplaces and governmental institutions like ours, and how you may be able to apply some of those things to your current work as a student and your professional career as well. So next slide. So we have 5 priorities. We have 3 foundational principles. You can come up with all these as a team, come up with all these different guidance principles and foundational principles and priorities. But it's really important for those things to be embedded in the documents that you hold up that helps to lead the department overall. And 2 of these documents we just adopted this year. On the right, the California Transportation Plan 2050. This is our long-range plan that has a 30-year horizon that's required by the federal government for us to create and adopt. And those principles, those priorities that I mentioned before, they're all embedded in this long-range plan. So our long-range plan also entails all those guiding principles and the priorities that I mentioned. Same thing with our strategic plan. The strategic plan is an internal document. It's an internal facing document that guides how our work happens within the department. So it's the document that explains our goals, our mission, our values, and the actions that we want to take. The principles that are here, and they're also in the long range plan. I think that's very important for any entity to make sure that if you're calling yourself, holding yourselves accountable and truthful to a set of actions, that it also be embedded throughout your guiding plans and documents. Next slide. So to talk about equity a little bit more, you saw it, it's become a buzzword in many settings. But what we like to say in California, specifically at Caltrans, is we don't want equity to just be a talking point. We want equity to be a living point, a point that we all live by. When you think about the history of this country and how so many decisions have been tied to creating inequitable outcomes, after the incidents of May 2020, after George Floyd was killed in Minnesota, we as the leaders of the department said we can't have business as usual on issues related to equity. Said we're going to have to step up and take it to another level. Even though equity is it's been a topic of discussion and focus in the department for many years, we said no, we have to do more. We have to go to that next level in our commitment to issues around equity. You know, Rosa Parks said many years ago. She said, "Us was places that she noticed in this world, that there was a black world and a white world." And you hear, we've seen all the battles and the fights that people like Dr. King had to fight for through transportation, through the bus boycotts in Alabama, in Tennessee and Mississippi. So transportation has had this long tie-in to a lot of the decisions that we make in the planning world and the transportation world. And in California, we're saying we're committed to seeing those inequities, no doubt, change throughout the places we have the opportunity to influence that change. Next slide. So how do we influence that change? How do we make that change happen? We put together a 4Ps framework on equity. These 4 things, we said, if we can accomplish key things under these 4Ps, we will move the needle. We will move California and its transportation system along to achieve the many outcomes that we're hoping to achieve. Number one, when it comes to our people, when we talk about people, that means our staff within the department. The fact that that 22,000 people that work for us, regardless, I mentioned before, regardless of their ability, regardless of their race, we truly want to make sure they have a chance to not only grow within the department through training and things like that, but have promotional opportunities as well. Have other opportunities that in the past they may have not had in an agency like ours, and also hiring as well, bringing in people to that traditionally may have been left out at every level, not only entry level, the maintenance workers and things like that that may get those opportunities, but in middle management all the way to executive management, making sure that people truly have an opportunity within our department. Projects and programs is about the fact that we know the many missteps and mistakes we've made in the past when it comes to projects and programs. We've built a transportation system that has marginalized, that has divided communities. Despite its uplift generally to people in this nation, it's also had some harmful impacts. We are saying that our projects and programs within the California Department of Transportation, we're going to make sure that it provides uplift and in no way provides division and harm to communities. Partnerships is about making sure that the very vast budget we have, to aid and support small business and DBEs, that we make sure we're doing our best to engage in partnerships. We have a $1.1 billion small business budget within Caltrans, within our department. So to help people, to help businesses, in particular minority businesses and disadvantaged businesses, get a chance to work with us. And finally, the P for planet is about making sure that the harmful impacts of the past from the work that we've done, that we provide uplift to the environment that people live in those places as well. Next slide.
I'm sorry, it's moving a little slow.
Yeah, it's probably a big file. If you could click again one more time.
Is it this one?
Yeah, it jumped. It jumped all the way. It jumped pretty far. Okay, here we go.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, right here. So I'll be brief on this. When we talk about equity, and one of the areas that we know we have to address equity issues is in the safety realm. There's very much a tie-in between what's happening on a general transportation sense and the decisions we're making and its connections to safety and equity. In this particular graphic, if you just look at, for example, the middle image, African Americans in California are 62% more likely to be killed on our transportation system than any other than the white race, for example. So very much issues and challenges that tie into the fact that we talk about transportation providing uplift and being more equitable. If you look at the last part of the image, similar thing, more likely to be killed in a bicycle crash. Hispanics, African Americans, Native Americans also have higher rates there. So next slide. Much work to be done on equity and safety. Go to the next slide. Just click one more time. Okay, let's talk about this a little bit. So climate action, as you heard from Dr. Herbert, is again one of those three guiding principles for us, those foundational principles. And here's why climate action is so big for us and so important to us in California. GHG, our greenhouse gas emissions in California. When you look at that, the transportation sector of all economic sectors is the leading cause of greenhouse gas emissions in California. 41% of all the GHG in the state comes from the transportation sector. A lot more farther ahead than industry. I mean, you see in some states, industry is typically the big emitter, the big polluter. That's causing a lot of challenges. In California, it's this, transportation, because there are more than 35 million registered vehicles in the state and people drive everywhere. So how to make that system cleaner? Because the impacts that this is having are enormous. We continue to have some of the worst wildfires that this state has ever seen. And it's not that transportation is igniting those fires, but because of the type of climate we've created, those fires continue to persist. Very often it's power lines or lightning strikes that are causing fires. But those fires persist because of very much the climate that we've created that continues to make the fires endure. So transportation is the biggest challenge when it comes to environmental issues in the state. So this is why, part of the reason why climate action is a top priority for us. Next slide. And part of the way to get there is not only the work that we're very much focused on at Caltrans related to creating more walkable, more bikeable, more transit-friendly transportation system, but also cleaning up the vehicle fleet within the state. Our governor, my boss, Gavin Newsom, he's been probably the most aggressive leader, I would say probably in the world on this issue, for sure in the country. He set us down a path already to ensure that in 13 years, in less than 13 years, California, no companies manufacturing cars in California will be able to create an ICE vehicle, an internal combustion engine vehicle. Every vehicle will have to be a zero emission vehicle that's manufactured and produced in the state within 13 years. That's right around the corner. So every car will have to be some form of non-combustion engine, type. Next slide. Innovation as a priority for us, going down the list here. I very much consider California the innovation capital of the world. If you question that and say, why is that the case? Just think about the most innovative companies in the world today. From Google to Apple to Tesla to all the rideshare companies like Lyft and Uber, all of them launched and were created right here in California. This is where they were. This is the genesis for many of those companies. I believe that we as a department can embrace that culture much more. And be much more innovative. Our department's been around, Caltrans has been around for, I think, 106 or 107 years. Departments like ours, governmental entities especially, sometimes can get very comfortable in the way we've been doing things for 15 to 20 years. But I think we constantly have to be reinventing ourselves and pushing ourselves to innovate. I think we're very much going down that path at California, the California Department of Transportation today. Next slide. Part of the way we're doing that is we're leading the way on issues related to connected and autonomous automated vehicles. We know that this is going to be a big part of the future. A lot of timelines from 8 or 9 years ago said that by 2022, you will start to see more and more of these vehicles on our system. It hasn't happened. We're a few months away from 2022. We're 4 or 5 months away. But I still believe that this is going to be a big part of the future. And you can tell just by increasingly some of the vehicles we drive today, how they can self-park, how they can, they have sensors to be able to avoid lane departure. There are 5 levels of automation, and very much today, most of the vehicles manufactured have at least two to three, a level 2 or 3 of automation in them. So this is going to be a big part of the future, even though we're not necessarily there yet. Next slide. Efficiencies is critical for us as a department. I think it's something that entities and you in your career, I think if you can, just like innovation, if you can embrace how and promote how an entity that you lead in the planning arena can be more efficient, I think it will pay major dividends. At Caltrans, we have, as was mentioned, a $16 billion budget, and it's again, the largest budget for any state DOT in the country. But some people hear those numbers and they're like, oh gosh, you guys are just spending money and just doing all kinds of stuff willy-nilly. And it's like, no, not by any means. We have to constantly be figuring out through technology, through different practices, how we can save money as we and become more efficient as we deliver transportation projects for the state. Next slide. Partnerships as that last of the 5 priorities P. I mentioned this a little bit under the equity banner, but I also believe that as us working in the planning industry, this is one of the core principles of planning in general, just in general, is stakeholder engagement and being able to build partnerships. It's such a big part of the work that we do, and something that we have to continue to hone. The fact that we are there not to just represent the things that we believe in and actions that we believe need to happen, but we're there to create a partnership and a bond with communities, whether it be a nonprofit, whether it be a neighborhood association, whether it be a for-profit. We have to build partnerships with entities to be able to move forward ultimately with the work that we're responsible for. I think it's so critical to truly being able to have success in the work that we do for communities. Next slide. Just 2 more slides here, and then we'll love to have a quick discussion with everybody on and sort of switching gears just to issues around how we can continue to grow in this field. Leadership is something that a lot of people believe that you are either, most people believe that you have to be born with, and that you have to, that most people that you see as leaders, that they just naturally have all these leadership qualities. But I very much believe that you don't have to be born with leadership skills. You don't have to be perfect from the womb, from inception with these leadership skills, that you can grow into them, that you can learn them. Some of these things, some of us have them just innately, but some of them we don't. And I believe as we spend the time, if you truly want to be a leader, and by the way, leader doesn't have anything to do with the position you have. You can be an entry-level planner or just one individual amongst many others and be a leader. You don't have to be the highest paid, the highest ranking to be considered a leader. But I believe as you spend the time to grow in these areas that you see on your screen and invest time in these things, you can be the leader very much that you want to be. Some of these things for me personally I believe are a little bit innate. But some of them, many of them, I've had to grow and work on. And some of these things that you see here, I am not good at by any means, and have to constantly remind myself and work on these things because I think it's so important that if I want to achieve the things that I want to achieve as a person and for people, that I have to get better in these areas, and it's constant work. At no point do you get to a place of perfection here, but I think we can continue to strive for excellence in these areas. And we can talk about this if there are questions on this later. Next slide. Oh, okay. I thought there was one more. Oh, here we go. Yeah, it's thrown off a little bit. I'll just explain this one very quickly because it's not coming up the way I thought it would. This particular image, this last one, President Kennedy gave a speech exactly 60 years ago, where he was explaining how important it is to think about transportation beyond building highways, and to think about transportation in the sense of thinking about land use and mass transit. Think about land use and mass transit. And the words, part of the words on here, he said, they are inseparable. They're together. They're two parts of the same process, is what he was saying here. And he was saying this because his predecessor, President Eisenhower, started us down the path of building this tremendous highway system that we see today, this massive highway system. And Kennedy was saying 60 years ago, look, highways are important, urban highways, let's build them, but let's not forget about mass transit and land use. And if you're in the planning, all of us today, we're part of this planning world, this planning program. We have to keep that in mind, that it goes beyond the highways, that we have to be all inclusive in our planning thought process. But this speech from 60 years ago is extremely inspiring to me. And that's why I always like to remind people and share this with people. Next slide. I think that's it. You want to get in contact with me. Sometimes it takes me a while to get back to you via email, but that's my email address, and also recently got on Twitter. So that's my contact information. Don't even waste your time trying to call me because I never answer the phone in here. Other people will get to it and probably won't get to it. So in a nutshell, just quickly, some of the things we're working on at Caltrans and my perspective on how you can get to the places that you want to get to in your career in the path. I brushed through that a little bit, didn't cover every single part of that, but some key elements there. So I know we only have 15 minutes, apologize, but would love to take as many questions as I can within that period. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Director. We really appreciate your willingness to talk with us. I've got a question from Eric. It says, how does the commitment, Eric, your question, how does the commitment to carbon neutrality affect your work at Caltrans?
Well, significantly. I mean, that's part of why you saw the graphic that I showed before of 41% of our transportation, 41% of GHG in the state is related to the transportation sector. So if we're going to get to carbon neutrality, not only do we have to create a transportation department that supports more multimodal choices, like I mentioned, that's a big part of how you get to carbon neutrality. We also have to have a transportation fleet that is cleaner as well, hence the switch over to increasingly electric vehicles. And that switch over to electric and zero emission vehicles is not just for the general public. Our department, the California Department of Transportation, we have 11,000, believe it or not, we have 11,000 vehicles in our department, in our fleet. And so we're gradually turning over that fleet as well to become, to support that carbon neutrality, those carbon neutrality goals. So it starts with us. We have to create a system that's supportive of it. We have to have a vehicle fleet ourselves, and a building fleet ourselves that's headed in that direction, and then support the movement towards, for the general public, towards zero emission vehicles as well, with things like charging, ZEV charging equipment, et cetera. Good question.
I've got a question for you, Director. While the students think about the questions that they're going to ask, I'm really curious about your, let's see, the way in which you decided, it seems as if you intentionally decided to run this department in a very different type of way, in that the majority of individuals that I meet that who are directors of DOTs, they're more technical, they're into the subject matter, but you seem to have decidedly taken the perspective of a more a holistic picture, looking at principles and issues and climate action and equity and so forth. I was really curious as to whether or not this is intentional. How does that work for you? How does that play within the political process? Would all of this change if we have if you have a new governor? And so I know I've thrown out a whole lot at you, but I was just curious as to your take in terms of managing and directing this department.
Dr. Herbert, that's a very good question. Very good catch by you as well. Noticing that intentionality, and you're very right about the fact that most state DOTs are not as focused on issues like I've laid them out. They're just not. I mean, you think about MDOT, for example, and I did a little bit of work for MDOT when I was in the program, some internship work over there. From then until today, I doubt you would go in and you would hear anybody discuss issues of this such, and that's pretty common at most DOTs. But I believe, and there are many people in this department, including other departments in state government in California, and the person who hired me as well, the governor. This is the direction. This is the path. And you know, I don't want us to lose sight of, and some people think they get this mixed up. I don't want us to lose sight of the widgets, the nuts and bolts of the things that we deliver every day. Some people forget about that when I give talks like this. They think I'm saying that we're no longer focused on building highways or building bridges. And I remind people, like, absolutely no, that is not the case. I mean, we still have to do those things. We have to build bridges. We have to build highways. We have to support transit. But at the center of all that, why do we do it? Why do we build all these things? It's because of people. So the goal has been, since I've been here, to become a more people-focused, a more people-centric. Instead of focusing on vehicles or cement and concrete, we're focused on people, making a difference for people. And if we're doing that, we're making them safer. We're making things more equitable for people. And the environment, the climate that they live in is going to be much better. That's how we achieve that holistic vision for people. Things like economy and things like that, those are key as well. But I think at the core of where our focus should be is those three things. So very good question, Dr. Herbert. But we haven't lost sight of that. And by the way, to the last part of your question, if there is another governor here or another director in this department, it's possible that those things could change and those things no longer be a focus. But I believe we have a great opportunity right now with the leadership of the state to take these issues to the next level.
Thanks for the response. I've got a couple of questions in the chat. There's another question from Eric. Does your department have to deal with the backlash from motor companies that are reluctant to go electric? And are electric 18-wheelers feasible to smaller company? And how do we incentivize cargo companies to go green? So that's quite a bit. So is there any backlash from your electric companies? He asks about 18-wheelers being electric and how to incentivize cargo companies to go green.
I'll try to take a couple of those. I may not be able to answer all those, but from a backlash standpoint, not really. There are other entities in California that have that responsibility as far as helping to turn the vehicle fleet over to become more zero emission friendly. So it's not nothing directly towards Caltrans, I would say, but there are other entities like the California Energy Commission and CARB, the California Air Resources Board, that bear a little bit more of that responsibility than Caltrans does. The second part of that question, Dr. Herbert.
So the second part asks about 18-wheelers and the feasibility for smaller companies.
As far as 18-wheelers,
electric 18-wheelers, sorry.
Yeah. It's becoming an increasing issue in California. Tesla is one of the companies that's been surprisingly leading the way. Well, I shouldn't say surprisingly. They have the biggest market share of electric vehicles anyway. But Tesla has been leading the way on electric trucks, 18-wheelers as well. Volvo and a few other companies have also ventured into this area. I think it's an important question, especially for California, because there's so much freight that comes through our state to the rest of the country. The top 3 busiest ports in America, the top 3 are here in California. 2 of the top 3, I should say, the Port of Long Beach and the Port of Los Angeles. When that freight comes in many cases from China, it lands on the Pacific near Los Angeles and Long Beach. And from there, it's dispersed mostly by truck, 18-wheelers, and rail to the rest of the country. So increasingly, this electric trucks are something that we need to focus on. Very, very good question. So it's happening. It's not happening at a massive level yet, but very much Tesla and Volvo are probably leaders leading the way in that area. If we could switch to another question. I know I just answered 2 for that one person.
Yeah, so I'm going to ask you 2 additional questions, and I see Tobias had his hands up, his hands raised. So the next question, what contingency measures do you have in place for Caltrans to deal with wildfire effects on the transit system?
Oh, wow. That's that one probably stumps me. As far as transit system goes, we're not an owner operator, if you will, for transit. We support transit across the state, and California, just like in many other areas, is so unique because there are more than 300 transit agencies in California. In the Bay Area alone, I think there are 28 transit agencies. So between San Francisco, Oakland, and San Jose, there are 28 just in that area alone. For comparison's sake, in Tennessee, there were less than 40. So there are quite a few. So we're not an owner operator. Our job is to make sure when it comes to fires specifically that evacuation routes are clear to allow people to be able to get out as far as when a fire actually happens. And then also when they need to get back in to make sure that the damages are on the roadway are repaired and the roadway is clear enough for people to get back in. But that's during and post. There's a lot that we can do from a pre-standpoint to hopefully prevent fires as well. But good question.
Okay. Next question is about addressing equity for electrical charging stations for residents in middle to lower income communities that don't own Tesla vehicles. How do you address equity?
That's a very good one. So when it comes to us becoming a more equitable state when it comes to zero emission vehicles and charging in electric vehicles, one of the things that's unique along the lines of this question, over the last 10 years, California has spent $1 billion on incentives for people to buy electric vehicles. So work with Tesla, work with Chevy Volt to get people incentives, rebates tax breaks to buy electric vehicles. But when you look at where that money is going to, those incentives, when you go back and see, okay, where did that $1 billion go? $100 million a year. Most of that money has gone to the middle class and upper middle class, the people exactly who don't need an incentive. Why are you giving rebates to somebody making $500,000 a year? But that's what's happened with that $1 billion. So there needs to be a refocus, and the state is doing this, a refocus on ensuring that lower income people, minority communities are truly getting their hands on incentives and rebates to go electric. But not only those incentives, but making sure, to the question, making sure the infrastructure that will support them going ZEV, going electric, is also within those communities as well, those underserved, those minority communities, that we have to build charging infrastructure in those places. And so we're trying to do that and target that as a state. It's not our sole responsibility at California DOT. Again, there are other entities, the Energy Commission in the state and the Air Resources Board are the other critical players to ensure that continues to happen. But excellent question.
Tabaris, are you there? Because you had your hands raised. Can you ask your question?
Yeah, thanks, and thanks, Dr. Director, for speaking with us today. My question is about public procurement, and how do you make sure that minority businesses are included in the public procurement process? And do you have any incentives or any programs that get small business owners prepared to bid on these public contracts?
Wow, another very good question. So at Caltrans, I mentioned we have the largest budget of any state DOT when it comes to small business, minority business, DBE business, disadvantaged business enterprises. It's last year we spent $1.1 billion on minority businesses, disadvantaged businesses. This year we're projected to spend probably 1.2, close to $1.3 billion. It's an area of challenge for us, however, because there are people who have learned to slightly manipulate the system to be able to get contracts to people. Contracts are getting into hands of people that are, the program's not necessarily geared towards. We're trying to get to marginalized, underserved, mostly minority community. And in this particular case, when it comes to our programs, it's Hispanic, Latino businesses and African-American businesses that have been left behind for many years in California, and trying to do that. So there's a federal program, the federal DBE program, and there's also a state program. And so that entire system is set up that's geared towards how we spend that more than $1 billion. But so many people have been disenfranchised and are jaded, to be honest with you, about our process. So oftentimes they don't want to get in. They don't want to be a part of it. And it's a constant effort for us, constant work for us to continue to tell small businesses, no, we have money. You can bid on work. You can go after work. Here's how you become qualified and certified to be able to do work with Caltrans. And so we have a civil rights division that's responsible for that. And it's their daily work. So if you look up Caltrans Office of Civil Rights, Caltrans OCR, Office of Civil Rights, that's all they do every day, is see how to make sure that $1.1 billion gets into the hands of the people that need it the most.
Okay, we have time for one last question. If you guys don't mind, anybody, one last question. Dr. Kumar, I thought you had a question. Yes.
Well, Toks, it is always so exciting to see you back, and I think I've mentioned it at least 3-4 times before, but it is one of the most impressive part of how much you want to give back to the department. That is truly exciting. But this time, I want to add one more thing. I'm sure you have heard me say this before, which is that based on my interactions with at least 4 different DOTs, I don't think Caltrans could have chosen someone better than you to lead them into the future. And so I'm so proud of not only what you're doing, but the fact that Caltrans wants to put its confidence in someone like you, which says volume about both them and you simultaneously. So I'm so glad you're doing this. I just have a very quick question related to have you and your leadership team, have you started discussing how a lot of equity related concerns aren't necessarily concerns that are caused in the outcome by what you do today? A lot of these concerns are really, I mean, they've taken place over the last 40, 50 years through systematic discrimination and institutional problems that we have had. So in many ways, in order to address these equity at a very fundamental level, so that we are not just trying to sort of put bandages over the open wounds that we have, it requires a fundamentally different type of institutional arrangement. And so in many ways, if there is an institution that I think I would pin my hopes for, that would be yours, that you're the one who will actually seriously start thinking about how do we rethink institutions themselves, so that we may not be able to make that much difference in people's lives today, but of everything we do, 20 years down the road, we expect something really miraculous to happen. And so in that sense, a lot of work you're doing, probably it's a net result, and the big benefits are really going to occur 20 years down the road rather than tomorrow. And so if you could share with us how you and your leadership team are thinking about these institutional reforms themselves.
Yeah, wow, Dr. Kumar, very good question. If you could close out the presentation as I answer this, and I can take, if this is the last one, or if anybody has one more, I'll be glad to take it. If you could close out the presentation so I can see Dr. Kumar and everybody else as I respond to this. I think that's a very powerful question. That's a very powerful question about the systemic nature of this work, because we can very much focus on the surface level sort of we can focus on the things that won't have a sustained long-term impact. And let me give you just a couple of, well, maybe give you 1 or 2 examples of things that we're thinking about in this state that I think are good, but what does it mean for communities and generations down the line? Maybe not so much. It feels good and it sounds good. For example, we are going down the path, we're part of a committee that's examining the names of parks and highway streets and public spaces all across the state of California to say, which one of these streets or names of these streets has a racist and negative history and past to it. And whenever we find those, we're gonna go through a process of changing the name of that street. What Thomas Jefferson Highway, whatever it is, and we'll say it's no longer Thomas Jefferson Highway. We're gonna name it, Barack Obama Highway, whatever you want to go. So I think exercises like that are very good and great. It's it's part of the transportation system. But what true impact does that have on somebody who lives near a highway where there's a lot of freight coming through there? Their entire neighborhood is being polluted by trucks. They live in an environment that's been harmed by the transportation system that we've built, that we've created. Those are the, even though that's infrastructure focused, that example I gave, those are some of the systemic things that that I believe we bear responsibility to help change. And they may not happen today, within the next few months or year, but we have to take an approach that goes issue by issue. That's why I mentioned those 4 Ps. I don't know if you saw those. People, partnerships, projects, and planet. We have to go through each one of those and figure out how we get to the root of the challenges there to be able to move the department and the state forward. it has to be the way that we do this, that we tackle this systemically. We can't just say, oh yeah, from the example I gave, let's change the name of highways and streets, and people get excited about that stuff. I think it's fine, but I'm much more focused on how we create a transportation system that truly provides uplift for people that have been marginalized and left behind for so many years, and gives them an opportunity for a better life. So it's a question that we could talk about for a long time, but that's a very powerful question, Dr. Kumar. Thanks for asking that.
I think it's 3:06. Do you want to entertain one more question? Because I'm trying to be cognizant about your time. And
yeah, my team and I gotta thank them. It looks like a few of them are on, Analysis and Susan. They set this up for this to be my lunch hour, so I've got a few.
Oh, okay.
They moved my lunch hour around. It's 1 o'clock here in California, so I got a little bit of time. So I can take one more or two questions if there are any critical big questions.
If there are any questions, well, if not, I wanted to wrap up a couple of things with you and say a couple of things, because just for the benefit of everybody on the call, we are actually have a relationship with Caltrans, and we are working out some details, and we're really thankful for the director to be able to have us to be able to do this. We are working with the Department of Rapid and Mass Transit. We did a special projects class this summer, and I'm thinking some of the students who are on right now were in this class, and apparently they enjoyed it very much. And we're expanding that relationship to do some internship programs, maybe to even look at some sort of relationship where we can use our students as research assistants in Caltrans. So we're trying to finalize that type of arrangement, and we really just wanted to thank you. And I also really wanted to go back to this concept, because what you're doing resonates with us, with me, because it's about building these healthy, equitable, inclusive, resilient, and smart communities. And so we are building that base for our students, making sure our students understand that our communities have to be human-centric and have all of those different characteristics. And I'm really, really happy that we can have a planner, an urban planner, in the position that you are in, so that students can see what they can accomplish. Because sometimes when we think urban planning and we stack up an urban planner to the technical person, to the engineer, architect, sometimes we feel like we fall a little short. But in your presentation and who you are and what you've done and what you've become is really so inspiring. I really, really wanted to just get that opportunity to say that to you. And we really respect you, and we really thank you very much for giving us your time this afternoon.
Dr. Herbert, I really appreciate that. I'm honored by such remarks, such comments. I think it's very true. A lot of these opportunities to lead entities like this are mostly given to people who have a financial background or administrative background, or mostly engineering background. And for me to get the opportunity to be in leadership in Tennessee as one of the number 2s there, and to now lead the largest state DOT in the country, it's an honor. And to come from the program that I came from, it's a big part of it, big part of the pride and honor as well. And I want to encourage all the students listening, everybody listening that's in the program, don't give up by any means on that twinkle in your eye of what potential you may have to get beyond what you're doing today. Don't absolutely give up. You're going to run through a lot of roadblocks along the way. You're going to stumble, you're going to make mistakes. I made several, but I promise you that if you keep your eyes centered on whatever it is that you're focused on, to lead an entity, to serve an entity, whether it be public or private, I absolutely believe it can happen. I definitely believe it can happen. So I'm volunteering myself and committing myself to the department Dr. Kumar, Dr. Herbert, I even see Dr. Edmond on at any
Dr.
point.
Thomas.
Dr. Thomas, yeah, at any point, if you need me to do anything, step in anything to share some insight, pledging to do that. So I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks again. And you enjoy the rest of your afternoon. And thanks again to your staff for organizing it. And we have one more to go. So one more session with you, which we're going to organize, but most likely for the spring semester, or we'll organize it with your staff. Thank you so much again. And you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.